Welcome to Beekeeping Today podcast presented by Bee Culture. Beekeeping Today podcast is your source for beekeeping news, information, and entertainment. I'm Jeff Ott.
And I'm Kim Flatham.
Hey, Jeff and Kim. Today's sponsor is Global Patties. They're a family-operated business that manufactures protein supplement patties for honeybees. It's a good time to think about honeybee nutrition. Feeding your hives protein supplement patties will ensure that they produce strong and healthy colonies by increasing brood production and overall honey flow. Now is a great time to consider what type of patty is right for your area and your honeybees. Global offers a variety of standard patties as well as custom patties to meet your needs. No matter where you are, Global is ready to serve you out of their manufacturing plants in Airdrie, Alberta, and in Butte, Montana, or from distribution depots across the continent. Visit them today at www.globalpatties.com.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, Global Patties. Hey, everybody, Happy New Year's! You know, each week we get to talk about how much we appreciate our sponsor support, and we know you'd rather we get right to talk about beekeeping. However, our super sponsors are critical to help making all of this happen. From the hosting fees to the software, the hardware, the microphones, the recorders, they enable each episode. So with that, thanks to Bee Culture Magazine for continuing their presenting sponsorship of this podcast. Bee Culture has been the magazine for American beekeeping since 1873. Subscribe to Bee Culture today. We also want to thank 2 Million Blossoms as sponsor of this episode. 2 Million Blossoms is dedicated to protecting all pollinators. Learn more on our Season 2, Episode 9 podcast with editor Kirsten Trainer and from visiting www.2millionblossoms.com, and that is with the number 2. You can also listen to the 2 Million Blossoms podcast we have available. It's on her website and wherever you download and stream your shows. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first show of 2022. And as soon as I can get my mouth working, we'll have a good year. Speaking of which, we have some great shows lined up for you this year, starting off with today's show, but more of that in a second. Hey, Kim, Happy New Year, buddy.
Yeah, it's, let's hope it's different than last year.
Oh, yeah. Hey, before we get to this year, how does the American Honey Producers Beekeeper of the Year celebrate their New Year's Eve? I just want to know.
We spent a quiet evening at home all by ourselves, avoiding the crowds, avoiding all of the things that are floating around outside, and just being glad that we don't have to be a part of it this year.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, well, we do have an exciting show lined up, but before we get to that, what do you think about this coming year? Do you have any predictions, any thoughts about 2022?
Well, I've been doing some research for a couple of articles I'm preparing to write. And basically what I'm looking at is what's climate change going to do to bees and beekeeping and beekeepers. And it's going to be more than you think. And it's going to be sooner than you think, according to what I'm reading. So no matter where you are listening to this, watch your temperatures in the spring. So if your early flowers come in too early, you're going to have a problem with maybe not enough food later in the spring. If it's too dry or too wet where you are, there might not be a nectar flow, or your bees may not be able to fly. The world is changing out there, slowly and a little bit at a time, but it's changing. This year's different than last year. So climate change is going to be the biggest thing, I think, the next several years, yeah. and people are going to have to get it fixed.
Yeah. Well, climate change is something else. I mean, where I'm sitting here with a yard full of snow, and it's been snowing off and on since Christmas Eve, and you're sitting there, what, is it barely 40 there today?
Well, it's just about 40 today, and this coming week it's going to be up over 50.
Wow, it's kind of global weirding, right? You have my weather, and I have your weather. Hey, on today's episode, Kim, we have Sven-Erik Spichiger. He's here to talk about the 2021 season of the Asian Giant Hornet.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see how well they were at finding the spread, if there was any of this creature out there. Let's hope you guys just keep that thing out there, okay?
Well, the state of Washington did a really good job last couple seasons, and last year especially. They had a Facebook page. And there were lots of people checking that every day and contributing to it. So you could keep pretty much up to date on what they were finding. but to have it all pulled together after all the much of the analysis has been done, and talking with one of the lead researchers and field people, it's going to be really good to have him on and talk about it.
Yeah, see what they've got planned for this coming season.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get right to the talk with Sven-Erik Spichiger. But first, a quick word from our friends at Strong Microbials.
Hello, beekeepers. Your honeybees face a lot of challenges out there. Unbalanced food sources from monoculture crops, holding yards, drought, food shortages, antibiotics, pesticides, and pathogens like chalk brood. To overcome these challenges, your bees need the multiple bacteria that are in all nectars, pollens, and the environment. These bacteria aid honeybees' digestion and improve your honeybees' response and resilience to pesticides. Now you can help improve your honey colony health with a quick, easy, and safe-to-use product. Strong Microbials Super DFM Honeybee uses naturally occurring bacteria to restore the healthy gut biome of your honeybees. Check them out today at www.strongmicrobials.com.
Hey, everybody, and while you're on the Strong Microbial site, make sure you click on and subscribe to The Hive, the regular newsletter full of interesting beekeeping facts and product updates. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Sitting across the virtual Zoom table right now, we want to welcome back Sven-Erik Spichiger of the Washington State Department of Agriculture. As you may recall, Sven was part of, he's been on our show for two other occasions, both in April's of first of 2020 and then of 2021, talking about the Asian Giant Hornet in Washington State. Sven, welcome back to Beekeeping Today podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here again.
Yeah, good to see you again, Sven. I'm hoping you don't have anything to tell us.
Mostly good news, actually. So,
well, that's encouraging. Okay.
Well, let's start the year off right then.
Yeah.
I know from being a beekeeper from Washington State, especially on this side of the mountains, one of the first questions, if not the second question I always receive is, are you worried about the Murder Hornet? And I always correct them and say, I'm sorry, it's the Asian Giant Hornet, please. And then go on. But so I'm glad to have you on the show as the expert. You've faced them head to head and have lived to tell about it. So let's get right into it. Why don't you introduce yourself and who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Sven-Erik Spichiger. I'm the managing entomologist for the Washington State Department of Agriculture, which means I get to oversee great programs like the Asian Giant Hornet program, the invasive moth program, which used to be called gypsy moth and is no longer called that, and also Japanese beetle and some other fun things we have going on in the state. Obviously, the center of attention has been Asian Giant Hornet for the past couple of seasons.
Yeah. Just a quick sidetrack, because I used to spend my summers growing up in Ohio picking the Japanese beetles off my grandfather's rose bushes. I mean, we got paid by the Japanese beetle for picking them off as roses. So it's interesting to see them making a comeback, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, unfortunately, a rather sizable infestation down in Grandview, and we're one of those states who, prior to that, never actually had it here before. So,
yeah. All right.
Surprise.
Yep.
Well, good. So, Asian Giant Hornet, how did they? Let's do a little bit of history. How did they show up in the United States or in North America, and how did they make their way to Washington?
Well, of course, Asian Giant Hornet was first detected in Vancouver, British Columbia, near the town of Nanaimo, and in 2019, where an actual nest was located, and some beekeepers actually got together and helped take it out. It's obviously raised a few eyebrows for us because, when something's new to the country, why are beekeepers aware of it already? Well, it's because it was attacking beehives very early on. And in fact, in 2019, we also had beehives being attacked here in Washington State, just on the other side of the border, where we had beekeeper of Ukrainian descent in the town of Blaine, who had 5 hives actually killed by Asian Giant Hornet in October of 2019. And he actually collected a few specimens. But Unfortunately, we didn't find that out until June of the next year in 2020. We also had another beekeeper turn a sample into Washington State University's extension to report that. That was also in October of 2019. And we got our first official detection here where some folks had taken a photograph, posted it on Reddit, and then were given the correct instruction to alert the Department of Agriculture. And that happened on December 8th of 2019. And that is very late in the year. So, we're just past December 8th now. And then, we haven't actually seen anything flying here this year or last year in 2021 until, it kind of petered out at the end of October in 2021, which is, just a little earlier than what we saw in 2019 and then what we were able to do in 2020. Of course, in 2020, we responded to this by doing a massive trapping effort, both by ourselves and with a huge amount of help from citizen scientists. So people actually went out, paid for the supplies, used their own time, mailed things in or used our drop-off locations to actually run traps all over the state. And this was a huge response that we so greatly appreciate because this allowed us to, in 2021, really focus in on the area that we felt was probably still infested. And that was the area sort of in and around the nest that we eliminated in 2020. And sure enough, that's unfortunately where we got our hits was right near the Canadian border to the east of Blaine, Washington. And for those who aren't from Washington or are not familiar, this is about 2 hours north of Seattle, right at the Canadian border, and kind of a rugged area. It's very rural. Lots of Himalayan blackberry, which, again, if you're not from Washington, this is a wonderful invasive species we have that just grows, much taller than me. And, this actually became a problem for us this year. Last year in 2020, we learned how to tag a hornet and follow it back to its nest. And that was quite a production. But eventually, we prevailed in the end. We found a single hornet nest in 2020. It was up in an alder tree. And we were able to eliminate that. Donning our fancy spacesuits, never actually even tried to sting us. So, we were relatively safe with everything. And, we thought, okay, one nest, but there were probably a few more. In 2021, we got a surprise real early on in May where a different color form of Asian Giant Hornet, a single specimen, was found 2 counties to the south, so just north of Seattle, in Snohomish County near a town called Marysville. And this was a huge shock. We were just, beside ourselves, but then we noticed the report basically included the specimen. The specimen was like dry and crispy. Looked like it had been sitting on a windowsill for, a year and a half or so. But what was interesting about this followed 3 weeks of rain in that area and was found outside near where a man had been planting some trees. And so our best guess is this is a dead specimen that came in a shipment of something and fell out of whatever he got out of his shed to help him plant the trees. I mean, that is the only logical explanation for us because the condition was basically that particular specimen had been dead for a while.
Interesting.
And what was really interesting about that one is it was a different color form. So we all know Asian Giant Hornet to have a freakishly huge yellow-orange head and some nice orange-yellow bands on the abdomen. And, stripes, like any child would draw a honeybee or something like that. This one had a mostly all black abdomen with just a yellow tip, which was the giveaway that it was the species Vespa mandarinia or Asian Giant Hornet. And for those who don't know, there are 23 species of true hornets in the world. None of them actually occur in Washington or are native to North America. So, we have an idea of what to look for. This one we felt was a color morph of one that's usually found near Taiwan or southern portions of China. And the DNA, unfortunately, it coded closest to the only specimen in the entire gene database that is from southern China. But that's like saying, well, actually, you really can't say it's from China. What you can say, though, definitively, is it was completely unrelated to everything we found in Whatcom County in 2020 didn't match that DNA at all. And more importantly, also did not match what was found in Canada in 2019 in Nanaimo. So right now, on very small data sets, we're still saying that Nanaimo detection is most closely related to hornets from Japan. The Whatcom County ones seem to all code to specimens from South Korea. And the one in Snohomish went closest to one from China. But again, we really can't even say that because there are so many regions surrounding that where we have absolutely zero data that it could literally be from anywhere else. That's just the closest one. Our level of confidence on that one was not as high as some of the ones from, say, Whatcom County, if you will.
So in 2019, you had the reporting of one outbreak or one Asian Giant Hornet, and you found one nest was found. And then 2020, I'm getting my years mixed up now. And then last year, there was one or two colonies found. That was the very first year you tracked them, correct?
Yeah, right. So the very first year we tracked, which was 2020, we found the one nest and that was taken out. But we also had
in the alder tree,
two trap clusters which had positives in them where we're pretty sure something's going on, but we were just never able to get additional specimens and find nests.
Yeah.
So here in 2021, we surrounded some of those areas. We got that early oddball hit. And by the way, additional trapping for the one that we found in Snohomish County yielded absolutely nothing. So we're guessing this is going to be what we call a one and done. Something hitched a ride in a box, fell out on somebody's lawn, and we're never going to hear anything more about it, other than the fact that my poor staff has to go out and service a bunch of stinky traps for the next couple of years to be sure of that. Sure. And that's fine.
And so 2021, you found there were three colonies found?
Yep, 3. So
and the last one in August. If I understand right, yeah.
So we ended up putting out ourselves about 835 traps. Cooperators like our friends at the USDA and some of the other state agencies added another 350 or so. And then citizen scientists chipped in another 400 traps here in 2021. And, for 1,600 traps. We changed up our trap densities a little, but we continue the most important part, which is the public outreach component, where we're doing Facebook campaigns, where we're, just doing advertisements, mailings, things like that. And this led to people calling in and showing us reports of Asian Giant Hornet attacking paper wasp nests on their eaves. And in the one instance, we were able to get there that day, and they revisited the paper wasp nests, and we actually netted them out of the air. So we didn't trap them. But we were able to get up there with an insect net, get a tag on, and oh boy, the first one of the year was frustrating. It was in an area that was completely surrounded by heavy vegetation that was pretty overgrown, a few trails going through the area, but the signal disappeared towards the Canadian border. And when I say we were close to the Canadian border, we were on the property adjoining the Canadian border. So
you had INS agents watching you from the just the other end of the yard, right?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because we use an ATS tracking system, and it looks for a little beep, beep, beep. And every once in a while, we get a little slightly higher pitched beep, and we're pretty sure that was trail cams or clandestine cameras, if you will, turning on as we were approaching the border. Because you get one beep and then nothing, which, our tags have a constant beep that go on a certain cycle. But it was kind of frustrating because we were able to actually net 2 different hornets that were coming to a particular house's paper wasp nests. And they would be flying off in the direction kind of towards the Canadian border. And we'd get in so far, get stopped up by, a mountain of Himalayan blackberry or some other impassable vegetation, and we'd be standing there and then we'd lose the signal. And so we're thinking, okay, it either went in the ground or whatever. And in the first case, the one had actually sloughed the signal off, or the tag off. And believe it or not, our crews were able to track and recapture the tag, if you will, in the middle of a forest. And, when you see these things, they're maybe the size of a Tic Tac, possibly smaller. So to find that in the middle of a Himalayan blackberry overgrown forest is absolutely amazing to me, that the crews basically reacquired the one tag, and we actually used that one again tied it back on, and that one eventually ended up finding the nest a few weeks later. But the second one we tagged disappeared into Canada, and we're sitting there going beep, beep. And so we're here in the middle of COVID still. Border is shut down. We're working with Paul Van Westendorp, who's the provincial apiculturist up in BC. And he has, a huge line of traps set up around the area just across the border from where we're working. But, we really have no way to get to them. But it did dawn on us that we do have something called the Peace Arch Park, which you're really not leaving the country, but you're basically able to interact with folks from the other country. And in fact, that's what we did. We went up to the Peace Arch Park. I hit a tag in the Peace Arch Park, gave Paul training on the receiver, and he was able to locate it and was pretty impressed with it. So we loaned him our equipment, and he went over onto the other side of the border right across from us. We can pretty much wave at each other. And he's trying to pick up the tag on the other side.
Better Bee is pleased to sponsor today's episode of Beekeeping Today podcast. For over 40 years, Better Bee has supplied beekeepers across the country with the tools, equipment, and knowledge needed to succeed. Because many Better Bee employees are beekeepers themselves, they understand your needs and challenges and are better prepared to answer your beekeeping questions. From their colorful catalog to their support of beekeeper educational activities, including this podcast, Better Bee truly lives up to their tagline of beekeepers serving beekeepers. See for yourself at betterbee.com.
We never relocated that particular tag. But as it turns out, we were able to net a third one, reattach the tag that had been sloughed off. And this one just kept coming back and forth to the same paper wasp nest. And so we were able to station a little further away. And what's really cool about this is the middle of August. We had scheduled a field trial day just to make sure all of our equipment was working because honestly, we didn't have any reason to use our equipment until October last year. And so we're sitting here in the middle of August. We invited our counterparts from Oregon, some folks from some other states, and all of our field staff just to get them trained on the tracking devices, the vacuum cleaners, let them try on a suit to see what it's really like, to have to try to work in one of those in the middle of August. And that was a huge success. We trained people how to do tags, and the Oregon crew said, hey, I understand you tagged one yesterday morning and you're tagging it. Do you mind if we tag along and help? Not to use a bad pun. And sure enough, it was actually an Oregon Department of Agriculture employee that ended up putting eyes on the first nest of the year because we teamed her up with one of our USDA people who was at the training as well. So the training paid off immediately because then we had 3 crews out instead of just 2. And, we were able to get to that one, and that one was very close to the Canadian border.
Sven, I want to interrupt you here for a second, just
sure.
to get some background. One of the things that you just said just a couple minutes ago was that you had thousands of people trapping.
Yep.
Trying to find out where this thing was or wasn't. Of those thousands of people, what did you get besides giant Asian hornets? I gotta believe there was a whole lot of misidentifications.
No, actually, so the first year when we did this, we actually had more trappers, and the most common turned in non-target catch actually was called spotted wing Drosophila, so a tiny little fruit fly. I mean, these absolutely inundated the traps. It turns out our orange juice and rice wine concoction catches way more spotted wing Drosophila than the trap's designed for it. So that was number one. Number two is actually our native yellow jackets. So like the people call it bald-faced hornet, but it's basically a yellow jacket that's black with white markings on the abdomen. Common aerial yellow jacket here, and then also a couple of our ground nesting yellow jackets are the most common things. Very few bees, like way less than 1% of the entire catch was honeybees. And most of those were from a couple of traps, which were probably poorly placed, I would have to say. They were near honeybee hive entrances. So you don't want to, place one of those traps there. But the other thing that we get, and, the trapping maybe not as effective as we'd like, but what we get is we get people out looking. And that generates the calls in. And to me, we work in concert with all these folks who are out kind of, checking paper wasp nests on the eaves of their houses. And that actually led to kind of all three. The third one was really us. We stopped at one of the houses we knew was experiencing this, grabbed one and found it within like 2 hours. But anyway, getting back to the tracking, it was really great to have trained Oregon the day before and then have them really, come up to the table there and provide assistance and help us actually locate the entrance of the first nest. And that one was inside of a rotten alder tree again. So just like the one in 2020, not in the ground. This one was at the base of the tree, but the nest was actually up a couple of feet. And this nest, these guys were more aggressive, and this was a healthy nest. This had almost 1,700 specimens in it on its own. And they did come out and attempt to defend themselves. And I can tell you with all certainty, the suits work. So it was actually very good that they came out and tried to hit us, and we know we can wear those without getting injured. So that was great.
1,700, that's big for one of these, isn't it? I mean, they're usually less than 1,000 or so.
No, they get much bigger in native range, but it's big for us because last year's only had about 700, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but the second one was something weird going on with it. The second one was in, again, a rotten alder tree on the edge of a farmer's field a couple miles over, so to the east. And this one was located much the same way. A person noticed it. They ended up calling for just to have us come out, but got impatient and captured it in a soda bottle and gave us the specimen, kept it alive. We were able to tag it, and it was basically located across the street in a farmer's field. And that one was not a healthy nest. That one only had like 400 specimens in it, and quite a few were males, and the rest of them looked a little funny. So we think a genetic anomaly with that one. So that was the second nest. And then the third nest, actually, that's one of our biggest success stories of the year, because we took everything we learned that Asian Giant Hornet was repeatedly visiting and robbing paper wasp nests. Mm-hmm. And just coming and going and coming and going. And we basically attacked that behavior. And it allows us to get live specimens without them sitting in a trap overnight. So we only have to ice them for 10 minutes and tie a tag on them. And they're, spunky. They're happy to move. And, they'll start going and doing that trap or that visit back and forth to the nest. And that helps us hone in on the nest so much faster. And so the second one, we actually decided to assemble the whole crew to stage for the second nest removal. And just because it takes crew members different times to get here from the different parts of the state, Chris Looney and I had arrived pretty early in the morning, and we still had a couple hours till the other crew members got there. So we went back to where we had seen paper wasp nests being attacked before. Chris netted one. We tied a tag on it, and then we were joined by our other crew members from APHIS and, Nathan Rausch, our pest biologist up there. And boy, they were able to get to that nest in like an hour and a half as we were going over to stage for the second nest removal. So we actually found the third nest really within a couple hours. And that's just learning from their behavior and figuring out things we had done wrong and just really improving on it. And that one, unfortunately, was 15 feet up, again in a rotten alder tree. So you're starting to see a theme here. The Nanaimo nest, which codes to Japan, was in the ground. The nests in Whatcom County have all been in rotten alder trees above the ground and genetically all code to Korea. So there may be some behavioral differences. It could be that the queen that established the population here was just predisposed to nest in alder trees, or it could be that Whatcom County is always so wet that they don't like to build nests in the ground there. That could be the other reason, but we are 4 for 4 tree nesting nests, and that is not what is in the literature, quite frankly.
Interesting. I have nothing but alder trees around me, so maybe we should put some traps up in my. No, I'm just kidding. So this year, You were very successful. You found 3 nests. You had a different tracking device this year, didn't you? Or how did that work?
Yes. So in 2020, we had started off using a Bluetooth device where we could involve the whole community using their cell phones. But honestly, the range wasn't good enough on it. The batteries were suspect. They would keep breaking. So a little touchier to operate with. I think some of that has been fixed a little bit. But honestly, it just turned out to be not the right device. So we switched to a professional UHF tag, and we had loaned, we had a loan from APHIS, who had been using it on spotted lanternfly back east. They were done with it for the year, so they just overnighted it. And in 2020, literally it arrived in the mail. We did training on it one day and found the nest the next day. So that was all good news. But in the meantime, we had actually ordered our own, which were from a different company. I like the ones we ordered a little better, and that's what we were using this year. It's the same basic tag. It's called a T15 from ATS, which is Advanced Telemetry Systems, I believe. But it's, 0.15 grams, so you're pretty sure the Hornet's going to be able to carry it. You can put a bit of a longer antenna on it because of that. And then, so the signal carries a little further. But it's much smaller than some of the things that they carry around as food pellets, for example. And so it's really no inconvenience to them. And what we noticed was they were happy to go about their regular activities after they had the tag tied to them. I mean, a couple of them didn't care for it too much, and they spent a little time trying to remove it. But after they realized that was a futile effort, they just went back to business as normal. And what I really like about this one is it goes beep instead of a very faint cricket chirp, which, versus beep is a big difference, especially if you have camera crews or weird things like a pump house, which without a similar signal, or people's internet Wi-Fi when you are facing towards a house gives you a static signal. So, some of the things that we learned over the last 2 seasons is that we're really good at that. The other thing we learned is that we're human. We cannot traverse the kind of terrain that you need to traverse as quickly as something that's in the air. And so I guess the next step for us is we're working with APHIS for what they call an unmanned aerial vehicle. Everybody else in the world knows them as drones. There is a company out of Australia who specializes in mounting software on drones that allows you to pick up a radio tag that's, tied to wildlife and actually give you a GPS spot for where it kind of stops. And, to me, I can send 2 or 3 crew members out there, sometimes not even my own people, hacking through Himalayan blackberry with the prize of ending up at the doorstep of an Asian giant hornet nest, which may or may not decide to defend itself while you're doing this. Yeah. And so for me, if we can get a GPS point using an aerial radio receiver, that's going to actually make things a lot safer and probably a lot faster for us, because then when we go out with the ground units, we know exactly where we're going already. And, we can take those kind of precautions that keeps us safe and everyone else. Now, of course, with any sort of a drone program, there are privacy issues. There are other things. Because we're operating near the Canadian border, there's even more fun that goes along with that. And by the way, you need a pilot's license. So, there's a lot that goes into that. But honestly, in this day and age, that is something I think we're probably going to explore that a little more. And then instead of a 2-week wait period between us finding the first live hornet and us locating the nest, maybe we're down a little closer to finding it in a couple of hours, like we did with the 3rd nest of the year.
Very cool.
Yeah, it definitely sounds promising. Easier, safer, faster, better. Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Well, anybody who's had to hack their way through the blackberry brambles would appreciate the use of the drone to get through it, because those things, no matter how well you protect yourself and how slow you go, you still get stuck and poked and scraped and loose skin.
A quick question, Sven. When you saw these Asian hornets attacking your local bald-faced hornet nests, were 2 things. One is they were attacking them and essentially tearing them apart, or they were destroying the nest and taking the larvae back to their nest. What was the situation during the battle?
We noticed a lot of this in August and early September, which, they don't go into that classic slaughter phase that we've all talked about in previous episodes and you see in the literature. They don't normally go into that until August, and that's where they'll mark a honeybee hive and come in mass and just decapitate everybody and leave. So basically, these were lone foragers, if you will. They would find one or several paper wasp nests, and they would go from paper wasp nest to paper wasp nest. And what they were doing was actually chewing pieces of the nest out in some instances. So stealing the paper, if you will, from the paper wasp nests, taking the brood. And, we do have the whole community, of course, is, 12 houses in a country block. And they all knew we were there, and everybody had, the wonderful hospitality to let us know what was going on their property. So that was great. And one person, she felt that she had filmed Asian Giant Hornet doing a mass attack on a paper wasp nest. And this was like second or third week in August. And this was, wow. I mean, we knew they did that, but that doesn't really appear in the literature much and hasn't really made the media here. So unfortunately, she was very interested in talking to us, but her husband was not interested in having anyone from the government on the property. So we were not able to confirm this. And she actually did not know how to record properly on her phone, so she didn't actually get a video of it. But what she described fits right in. We do happen to know, because there was a trap on that property, that Asian Giant Hornets were visiting the paper wasp nests on that property. But what she described was one of them came, and then all of a sudden at 6 o'clock, as she was sitting out on the deck, 5 or 6 of them came and just absolutely destroyed the entire paper wasp nest.
Wow.
Killing all the adults and then carrying the brood off. And so that was really interesting. And we wish that she had videotaped it properly, because that is something we would like to share with everybody. But what I can tell you is Chris Looney at the third nest went out, and the third nest is quite a fun story, because we had to go up in our extremely comfortable hornet suits into a bucket truck. And so we had to be lifted 15 feet off the ground to be able to perform the extraction. And so this took a little while to set up. We weren't able to kill that nest in 24 hours. That took us an additional week or so. But what was really cool was Chris Looney was able, since we had this and the entrance was 15 feet up, it was relatively safe to operate around it. So he was able to conduct a few experiments. And one of them was to net live hornets that were returning from the field carrying food pellets. And we analyzed all these pellets to see what they were eating. And I did confirm all this with him this morning, but the most common, it's hard to say what the most common food source. The thing that showed up in the DNA analysis the most was Polistes wasps. So those are paper wasps that build nests on the eaves. The bald-faced hornet, or Dolichovescula maculata. So that's the black, what people call bald-faced hornet here. Honeybees was third. And then close fourth was our other yellow jackets. And the one thing we did have is no reported attacks on honeybee hives from apiarists this year. So that was great. But we did have, and there were photos submitted with this, photographs of them basically preying on single honeybees that were visiting sunflowers. And so we do have a photo of this. And obviously the DNA evidence and the food pellets backs up that they are preying on European honeybees and a lot of our other native things that are supposed to be here, and a couple that aren't supposed to be here. But there were also some other cool things in there. Hamburger was in there. That was way down the list, but there was a DNA hit for hamburger. Of course, human, but that's probably contamination from us playing with the samples. We also analyzed the fecal pellets from the larvae in the nests and got similar results. So they're making use of several of our native insects, even supposed really bad predators like dragonflies, the kings of the sky. Yeah, well, guess what? Asian Giant Hornet eats dragonflies. So that's in there. And
Wow. They really are an apex predator then.
they certainly are. Yeah.
A question. So they're bringing back hornets to their nest to feed to their young. Somehow they're dissolving the contents of that hornet, so it's a liquid or a paste that they can feed to the larva?
Okay, so a bit of a complicated thing. So they chew it up into what's called a meatball, and the larvae actually have pretty strong mouth parts. A lot of people don't know this, but after you've taken out a hive and you have the brood, you can actually hear the larvae like clicking. And that's a click, click. And so it's two big mandibles kind of clicking together. And they'll do this in waves sometimes. It's really bizarre behavior. I think we may have caught that on video.
There's a sound in the night I don't want to hear.
Yeah, no, that's a nightmare sound. I imagine that as just being something of nightmares.
Wow.
Yeah, it is actually a little creepy.
Yeah.
But anyway, larvae are able to use this pre-chewed up stuff, and then they will actually turn that into what's called hornet juice, if you will, and they will secrete that, and that's actually what the workers prefer to feed on. And so that's what they will mostly feed on. Now we trick them with strawberry jelly or orange juice or some other fun things, but they don't actually chew up and eat the things that they're going out to catch. They will give it to the larvae. The larvae will regurgitate a food for them. So a little different strategy than you see in most of these social insects.
In Asia, where these hornets came from originally, the honeybees in Asia, when they're attacked by these hornets, have some defenses that because they've been exposed to them for so long, that the honeybees here don't have. I'm told. So there's the fecal spotting by the front of the door, and then the balling where they grab. 20 of them will surround a giant hornet and essentially bake it. They'll raise it to 117 degrees or something, and that heat kills it. Did you see any of that behavior with the hornets that they were attacking here?
No, and like I said, it was mostly paper wasp nests that we were observing them on, and there were a couple larger paper wasp nests where they would, as a group, kind of come after it, and then it would just move to the next one. But I also witnessed myself one of them coming up to a pretty loaded condominium of paper wasps, and they came out at it to try to scare it away, and it just kind of laughed at them like they weren't even there.
Okay.
One time it knocked it down to the ground, but then it flew up and took what it wanted anyway. So there's just no defense for the stuff.
Yeah. Well, I can see then if one of the things that people where you are also could be looking for is destroyed paper wasp nests, either the fluff on the ground when it falls or half of one still hanging in the tree. That would be a good sign that there's lots of these things somewhere close by.
Absolutely, and that is something we did end up working into the outreach a little later in the season through the Facebook chat, the Facebook groups and things like that. And it's probably something our outreach person, Cassie, is going to be, developing. If you're concerned about these on your property, keep an eye on your paper wasps all year.
Yeah.
You'll see them.
I have seen birds pick at the paper wasp nest to grab the larvae out and tear them apart pretty regularly around here.
Well, you got some nasty birds out there.
You don't want to cross them, Kim. You just don't want to cross them at all.
True.
Hey, Sven, also you said that there was one colony that was over 1,700 individuals in it. How many queens were in that colony?
Just one.
Just the one queen. There weren't any virgin queens. There weren't.
No, nothing like that. So remember, early in the conversation, I had mentioned everything seemed kind of early this year. Our first nest was in August. The other two were in September. We got to all three nests, only had one queen each before any new breeding casts have been produced. So honestly, with no other traps and no other public reports coming in, we are cautiously optimistic. The only thing that happened was about a month after we were done, a Japanese beetle trap, of all things, set in British Columbia. It had a specimen in it that looked even more beat up than the one we got earlier in the year, which means it had been sitting there for a while. We checked, and it had been last serviced around the time we had taken out our last nest. So we're assuming this is a straggler because Paul had a really good trap line going just north of us there. So, and that was the only thing, is a Japanese beetle trap just across the border ended up picking up what we believe is one of the stragglers. I do believe we're testing the DNA on that one, but it was in pretty foul shape. It had been sitting around in a trap for over a month.
So that's a great segue into what are you looking forward to this year in 2022?
Well, time will tell. That whole area got flooded really bad from what we know from the literature, which obviously it's not following what it's supposed to be doing in the literature.
It doesn't read books.
Yeah. Overwintering queens will make an earthen cell. If an earthen cell is sitting underwater, you got to think that can't be good for an overwintering queen. So we're hoping that'll help us. We of course are, as long as we have a positive in Whatcom County, we are locked into an additional 3 years of trapping to prove that it is pest free. So we will have our surveillance running. We'll continue the outreach, and with our new information about paper wasp nests on people's eaves, I think we'll get, as much, even more help than we got this year. And we got a ton of help from the public calling these things in. And, we have a good crew of people. They know what they're doing. We want better traps, though. We know our traps work. We've collected hornets in them. One of our live traps actually caught a couple of them near the third nest, but they were out so long that, it was kind of hot during that time of year that those were non-functional specimens. But so we know our traps work, but we don't know how well they work. APHIS has been working on a couple of attractants. We've collected some volatiles from paper wasp nests, because one thing we observed in the field was one particular hornet that we had tagged, and we were trying to follow her, and then we realized we were walking in a triangle. She was basically going from one paper wasp nest to another, and then again and again and again. Very odd behavior, but what we did notice was the third paper wasp nest she was visiting was inside the pipe of a basketball stand. So it was not visible. And so how does she know that's there? And so we got to thinking, they really seem to be able to find these nests no problem. She's obviously finding it in a hidden location. So it really can't be visual. So there has to be something coming out, from the paper wasp nest that's attracting them. So Jackie Serrano, who works with APHIS, she has been testing volatiles, or putting together lure blends for us to test. The problem with us testing them, though, is we don't know where they're located here. The population's not huge. We know there is a population. We've killed 3 nests, so we knew we had at least 3 nests, but we don't know if there are more. So us testing lures here is almost pointless. So we are going to have to test those overseas. And it's been difficult with the pandemic for us to get any of this kind of stuff done. We got some lures over to a cooperator, I believe, in Japan, not Korea, earlier, but we're a little more interested in testing our stuff in Korea, since it kind of seems like we have Korean hornets, if you will. So the behavior of nesting in a tree, we don't know what that does to, the efficacy of the trap versus one that nests in the ground. So we want to make it as close to where they came from as possible. And by the way, they're all over the place there. So if we set a trap out and it is effective, in theory, we should draw them in, and then we'll know what to use here. That's one thing for 2022 we want to get accomplished, is some testing over in Korea.
That'd be fun. And that would be really good. And do you hope to get that testing done before our season gets going at the end of the year, or at the end of the summer, or in conjunction with?
Probably throughout the year. We want to get over and get them up to try to attract queens first, because we do have some things that are mimicking oak sap, which is supposed to be the preferred food. So we want to get those kind of up during queen flight season. So we're thinking May, June, sort of. That's about when they seem to come out over there, according to some of the folks who've been talking with. And then just kind of get that set up, and then leave everything there and let them run them throughout the season to see, how effective they are, and then just kind of tabulate the results in the fall. So it might not help us out in the coming season, but if we still persist with the problem here, at least we'll have a tool kind of ready to go that's maybe better. We also actually switched up our bait for our citizen scientists. We let them run with brown sugar and water. because it's a lot cheaper and you only have to service it every 2 weeks. I've been doing that on my property since, well, I was doing it before we had Hornet, but that's just because I'm insane. I like to collect bugs, but we're really seeing no difference in the attractiveness between brown sugar water and the orange juice and ethanol. So they seem to collect basically the same things. A lot of fruit flies, a lot of the native yellow jackets, not much else. No Asian giant hornets yet, at least out here on the Olympic Peninsula.
One of the original recipes was for a special wine vinegar.
Well, it's not vinegar. It's basically rice cooking wine.
Yeah, and that was really hard to find, I recall.
Exactly, and that's why we made the switch to brown sugar, because that seems to work back east on the European hornet or Vespa crabro just fine. Mm-hmm. So we figured no harm in letting folks off easier. It's a lot cheaper because a bag of brown sugar is what, $2?
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here today, Sven. It's been a fantastic last, three years you've been talking to us about it. Look forward to you coming back early next year and telling us you found nothing and you're just chasing Japanese beetles.
Well, the other half of that, Jeff, is if you find a whole bunch of them all of a sudden, don't hesitate to get a hold of us so we can help spread the word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess my boss did it. We had our holiday party and my boss shared his favorite story from the year. And apparently it was me trying a live hornet pukie in the field from the first nest that we killed it from the year. And I got to tell you, I know they call it a delicacy, but I'm not feeling
it. Did they get that on video?
I think somebody Carla took a photo. I think it may actually be up on our media site.
Well, maybe she can get us, and folks can check our show notes. Maybe we can get a picture of you testing out the delicacy of the Asian Giant Hornet larva.
Well, Chris also tried some. Apparently, we did this wrong. You're supposed to remove certain parts. He tried the cooked version. He said it was no better. Well, honestly, it just leaves a bad aftertaste in your mouth.
There's no dipping sauce or nothing to salt, pepper?
Not in the field. Not in the field, there isn't.
Squeeze some lime juice on it, something? A shot of tequila?
I may have had 3 lemonades on the way home just to get the taste out of my mouth.
Well, Sven, we really appreciate you taking the time today to join us on Beekeeping Today podcast. Look forward to having you back. And here's to a very productive season in 2022.
All of us east of you appreciate your efforts. You can keep that up and keep it out there, okay?
We'll continue to do the best we can.
Okay.
Thanks, Sven.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Actually, overall, I think Sven had great news for us. I mean, it sounds like it's not turning out to be as big a deal as we were led to believe it might be.
Yeah, if you got to start the new year out like we're doing today, news like that is a good way to do it. So, yeah. Sven and all your crew, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, if we weren't all dealing with COVID, maybe we'd be running around, waving our hands in the air.
Yeah, you're right. This was good news, and this thing isn't going to take us by storm, at least for a while.
Yeah. Well, let's hope there's no surprises in 2022 this year. So, all right. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Before we go, I want to encourage our listeners to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, wherever you download and stream the show. Your vote helps other beekeepers find us quicker. Even better, write a review and let other beekeepers looking for a new podcast know what you like. You can get there directly from our website by clicking on reviews along the top of any web page. As always, we thank Bee Culture, the magazine for American beekeeping, for their continued support of Beekeeping Today podcast. We want to thank our regular episode sponsor, Global Patties. Check them out at www.globalpatties.com. We want to thank Strong Microbials for their support of the podcast. Check out their full probiotic line at www.strongmicrobials.com. Check out Better Bee and all of the great beekeeping supplies at www.betterbee.com. And finally, and really, truly, most importantly, we want to thank you, the Beekeeping Today podcast listener, for joining us on this show. Feel free to send us questions and comments at questions@beekeepingtodaypodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else, Kim?
Yeah, just one more thing, Jeff.
Yeah.
Good news starts the year. Share it with a friend. Send it out there and say, all things being equal, this was good news.
That's very, very, very good news. Yeah, good way to start the year. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.